Hello, my name is Davina Morris, and today I would like to talk to you about child sexual abuse. It's my goal in this speech to convince you to teach others about child sexual abuse prevention. First off, I would like to start by asking you a question. How many child sexual abuse victims do you know? I ask you this question because 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually assaulted before they turn 18. This study comes from David Finkler, who is a professor at the University of New Hampshire. He has written many books on the subject, has received awards, and also received grants, all around sexual abuse and victimization. You may ask, what does the statistic have to do with me? Let's take an example. In this class, we have 10 females and 11 males, which includes the instructor. So this means that 2.5 of the females in this class and 1.8 of the males in this class have been sexually assaulted before they turned 18. If we look around and talk to those closest to us, we'll find that child sexual abuse happens more often than we think. I'd like to give you some background about child sexual abuse prevention programs. They began in 1977. The first one in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with a law firm who had already dealt with sexual abuse. They were given a small grant to research prevention programs. In 1980, the U.S. federal government started backing some programs about child sexual abuse prevention. All this was very little money. A lot of it was grassroots prevention, people who really thought that this would work. Let me talk about I'm going to explain some of the forms of child sexual abuse. They are rape, sexual molestation, sexual assault, incest, exposure of the genitals, exposure to sexual acts, and exposure to sexual material. I'm going to talk about some statistics on sexual abuse. It's important to note that not all statistics are correct, because a lot of people do not disclose this information. It doesn't get to the authorities where it can be reported. Susan Whirl, in the Journal of Child Sexual Abuse, wrote about this and how often people do not report child sexual abuse. Now, in 2005, reports state that 78,188 sexual abuse victims, and this comes from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. In 2007, there were 248,300 sexual abuse victims, and this comes from RAIN.org. A study in 2004 stated that, the study was by David Finkler and Jones, said that sexual abuse was down 47%. There can be many reasons for this. Some can say that, be on the negative side and say less people are reporting the abuse. Some can be on the positive side and say that these programs that have started in the 80s are actually working. It is difficult to determine these numbers, if they're correct or not. The Journal of Child Sexual Abuse states some hardships that victims go through, and it really changes who they are. So victims face depression, anxiety, anger. They have an impaired sense of self. They have problems with their sexuality. They have cognitive disturbances, which make it difficult for them to learn in school. They have physical problems, such as sexually transmitted diseases and urinary tract infections. It also causes interpersonal difficulties, which makes it more difficult for them to interact with other people. They have less social competence. They have more aggression. And they have the less ability to trust people. They are also socially withdrawn. Some of these studies also reveal that parents teaching their children about child sexual abuse prevention is not always the right thing. I disagree with this, but let me tell you some of the statistics about why people think this. They say that parents don't teach their children that a perpetrator could be the family member. In most cases, incest is the form of child sexual abuse. It's at a high percentage. It gets 30% for family members and 40% for somebody that they know. So these are happening, sexual abuse is happening to children by somebody that they know and trust. They also say that parents don't teach their children about the behaviors of the perpetrator. I think that as parents and people who care about children, we need to look at it from all angles and be aware that many things can happen. Now let's talk a little bit about how we talk to our children, what terms we can say to them to help child sexual abuse. First off, I'm going to start with private parts. There's a little bit of a debate about this as well. Some people think that we should teach our children the specific names for their genitalia. Other people think that this is too graphic for them, that they cannot understand this. But if we work with children, we know that we have to be specific with them. So giving them names specifically is going to help them. It also helps in disclosure information. When a child discloses any sexual abuse, they'll be able to use the correct names for their genitalia and reveal what happened to them. Some also believe that if children are aware of their genitalia names, that it makes them less of a victim because they're more aware of their body. We also need to teach our children about body ownership. They need to understand that their body is their own. We also need to talk about okay touch and not okay touch. This began with good touch, bad touch. But it's a little bit confusing to a child because some sexual abuse experiences can actually feel good to them. So we want to let them know that this is an okay touch and this is a not okay touch. We don't want to teach them good and bad. We also want to teach them that there's no secrets, that you do not keep secrets from your parents. Now this can be differentiated between surprise. A surprise is short term, and a secret is long term. So we don't want to have any long-term secrets between us and our children. We also want to teach our children to ID strangers, that a stranger is anybody they do not know. They need to know that strangers are not always mean. Sometimes they can be very nice. They need to be able to identify strangers. They also need to know the tricks of these strangers and perpetrators, such as, I have a piece of candy for you, I lost my puppy, will you help me find him? I have a message for you from your parents. There are also other tricks that we don't know about, and we need to be aware that we don't know all the tricks of the perpetrator, and we need to understand that as well. We also need to teach our children that family members can be the perpetrator, that it's not always strangers. This needs to be enforced as well. Just like we spoke of earlier, most child sexual abuse comes from somebody that the child knows and trusts. We also need to teach our children about fault and blame, that if they experience any abuse, that it is not their fault, that it is the adult's fault. In some reports, it's stated that sibling incest is on the rise and cousin-to-cousin incest is on the rise. So we need to teach them that it's an older child as well, that they're to blame, that they should know better. And we need to be aware that the perpetrators can be an older child. In summary, I would like to remind you, that child sexual abuse prevention programs are set in place. I also think that parents should also reinforce this at home. I also encourage you to go out and research it on your own. Look at the different terms that are out there, the different prevention programs that are out there, so that you are very well educated. In closing, I would like you to think about all those children out there who are brave enough to disclose this information and give us the statistics that we have today. I would also like you to know about those who haven't, those children out there who are still suffering child sexual abuse right now. Thank you, and I hope that I have convinced you to do child sexual abuse prevention.